Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe. All of us are focused, of course, at the moment on the COP26 in Glasgow and the international efforts to tackle climate change. Climate change will certainly destroy our planet by the end of the century or beyond, if we are not successful in reducing carbon emissions. But we should spare a thought nonetheless for something that's going to start up in New York on the 28th of January next year, which is the latest review conference of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT, RevCon, as diplomats call it. So what, I hear you say, is this not just another worthy UN meeting? The answer is no, because although, yes, climate change over several decades can destroy the planet, let's not forget that nuclear weapons could do the same job in a single afternoon. And certainly since the NPT RevCon was due to meet in the spring of last year, postponed 3 times because of the COVID pandemic, the nuclear situation has not got any better. We've seen Iran go back to processing, North Korea testing ever more missiles, including a ballistic missile launch from a submarine last week, Russia, the United States, China investing in hypersonic glide missiles and continuing to modernize nuclear submarines and nuclear bombers. At the same time, the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, though it's often been fragile, with North Korea withdrawing or India, Pakistan and Israel refusing to join up in the first place, the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty still has done some useful work. It set the norms and standards for how we regulate nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. Under Article 6 of the treaty, the nuclear weapon states have committed to disarm, even if they haven't agreed to a timetable. The treaty has regulated the access to civilian nuclear power for peaceful purposes. And the agency which it established to do this, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, has come up with a system of safeguards to make sure that nobody cheats. And currently 183 countries come under some form of IAEA safeguards. The agency and the treaty have done, by and large, a good job of verifying Iran's compliance under the nuclear deal. And maybe less known to you is the fact that the agency has developed nuclear materials for civilian purposes, such as, for example, treating cancer, coming up with sterilization techniques for COVID-19, monitoring nanoplastics in the world's oceans, improving food safety and agriculture standards. So it's not surprising that the Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, has also been at the COP26 over the last few days. But the NPT regime now faces, apart from the activities of the nuclear states, another big challenge, which is that last year, an alternative, a rival, came into force in the UN, which is called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the Nuclear Ban Treaty. 123 countries have signed up to this so far, and it represents the frustration of the non-nuclear weapon states with the slow, ponderous pace of the multilateral NPT process, which has not seemed to be going anywhere particularly fast, and the abolitionists, of course, want to delegitimize nuclear weapons altogether and simply call for an outright legal ban. So if the advocates of the NPT approach, traditional multilateral step-by-step disarmament, are going to sort of get back on top of this intellectual debate, what does the NPT RevCon in New York need to achieve? Well, to my mind, 5 things. Number 1, a recommitment of all sides to the goal of universal disarmament. Yes, it's in the treaty, but it would be highly symbolic that the states say it out loud once again in New York. Secondly, the NPT community has to recognize that the nuclear ban treaty exists. The nuclear powers don't want to do this because they think that in doing so, they would give more boost, more legitimacy to the abolitionist cause. But the elephant is in the room, and New York is an occasion for those who believe in nuclear deterrence, that it really still plays a stabilizing role in international security. It's an opportunity for them to make good and better arguments, not just to declare that the abolitionists are naive or not realistic, for why their particular approach is the better and safer one in the long run. Thirdly, there is at the moment an enormous polarization between the anti-nuclear camp and the camp that favors nuclear deterrence. The gulf has never been so broad. And so New York is an occasion to build bridges. For instance, Sweden has started the so-called Stockholm Process, coming up with 22 different steps and a stepping stone document for how the two camps could come close together around risk reduction measures, around transparency, around taking nuclear weapons off high alert, around refusing launch on warning doctrines, for instance. And one idea is called the sole purpose doctrine, where everybody would agree that the only function of nuclear weapons is to deter a nuclear attack or to respond to a nuclear attack. It has to be said, though, that this sole purpose doctrine sends shivers down the spines of many NATO allies who have traditionally relied upon US and British and French nuclear deterrence to respond to a Russian conventional attack. But still, the idea is out there. And if the nuclear powers in New York would at least agree to some of those 22 proposals of the Stockholm Initiative, it would help to build bridges over the current chasm. Another thing that New York could do is to solve an issue opposing at the moment the US and the UK and Russia and China. This is the AUKUS deal, whereby the US and the UK will sell nuclear powered submarines to Australia. Russia and China say that this violates the prohibition on the transfer of nuclear technology in the NPT. The UK and the US say no, because we're building submarines, not bombs. So the NPT review conference needs to adjudicate. And finally, nuclear safety. As more countries develop civil nuclear reactors, which could be a good thing as a way of cutting their CO2 emissions, the ability to monitor the safety of nuclear isotopes, nuclear reactors, research laboratories, and enriched fuel based on uranium and plutonium becomes ever more urgent. And the review conference is currently going to debate a convention on the protection of nuclear materials, which could usefully be finalized and open for signature in 2022. So in conclusion, I would hope that the review conference would avoid the obvious temptation to focus only on the high-profile media things like Iran or North Korea or nuclear weapons-free zones in the Middle East. The reason is that these issues are being handled by other bodies, and the NPT has very little added value. So far better to focus on the pragmatic agenda which I have outlined, and to once again show that the NPT route is better than the nuclear ban route to achieve effective nuclear disarmament, verified, and something in which we can all have trust and confidence. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, please keep your eyes firmly fixed on Glasgow, but spare a glance nonetheless for New York in January. That is an important part of saving the world too. Thank you very much for watching and listening today, and look forward to engaging with you as always next week. Bye for now.